What do you think about Nigel Farage? Where is he now?
If Nigel Farage is watching,
it's bad for Europe, it's bad for peace in Europe, it's bad for the economy. There's nothing good about it.
What's going to happen with pound?
I think the pound is going to take an enormous drop straight away.
Europe has taken the opportunity to punish us because we're kind of the first country to try it, and they want to send a very clear message not to do this.
I feel quite sorry for her. I feel like she's been given a shit job.
25 million pints of beer a week, or Europe.
I'm Andrew Gunman, I'm from Kingston, London.
When I say the word Brexit, what is the first thought that comes to your mind?
I hate it. It's bad for Europe, it's bad for peace in Europe, it's bad for the economy. There's nothing good about it.
Hi, I'm Alec and I'm from London.
I am Chris, I'm also from London.
Did you vote?
I voted to stay. I just think that there's lots more positives for staying in than leaving. In terms of the economy, I think that one of the big issues that was highlighted was immigration. I think actually that benefits more to our country than it takes away. I think unification is kind of the future rather than fragmenting and staying away from kind of cooperation. And I think it was kind of driven by a small subset of the Conservative Party that don't represent the full country.
My name is Scarlett. I'm from the UK. I voted to stay because I didn't really believe that it was of a benefit for our country to leave. I mean, obviously being in London is very different the rest of the country, but it's a hugely multicultural city. That will change the UK and will definitely change London. It won't be the multicultural city that we know and love.
I'm Peter, I'm from Kent. I did stay. Well, I think the economy is pretty good as it is. I just think that trade relationships will just continue to thrive. I just couldn't really see any upside of leaving.
Hello, my name is Andrew and I am from the north of England. I vote yes, to remain, yes, of course. Of course. I like the colour of my passport.
I'm Sam and I'm from the US.
If you could vote, what would be your decision?
I would be against it, personally. I think it's just better to have an inclusive economy. I think there's so many Europeans in the UK that you're just dividing a lot of industries, you're losing a lot of employees. I think it would be better to have everyone together rather than come apart.
I'm Tom, I'm from Poland. I would vote to leave because the European Union is treating countries, I would say, not fair. We live in a situation when France and Germany are trying to implement their rules to the other countries.
Why people voted leave? What are their expectations?
Well, I mean, I don't know what their expectations are, that the world is suddenly going to get so much better, and then all the problems that are going on in the UK and all over the world are somehow the fault of other countries and stuff. Yes, there is a lot of things to do with immigration, and let's be fair, there's a lot of kind of latent racism that goes on with people who don't like immigration. People who don't like Alex Johnson, I won't call him Boris Johnson because his name's not Boris Johnson. There was lots of kind of individual agendas were going on pre-Brexit, which has led to Brexit.
A lot of people who wouldn't normally vote in a parliamentary election because in their electorate or constituency maybe their vote doesn't count. In a referendum every vote counts, and they're maybe frustrated about a lot of things, possibly not a lot of awareness about the EU or Brussels, etc., which is a force for good in my opinion. But the newspapers and certain politicians have vilified the EU, and a lot of people thought, well, maybe that's the reason why my life's not so good.
I mean, the people who voted to leave, obviously, if you look at statistics, were slightly of the older generation. And I think for them, they probably don't see the European Union economically doing us any favours.
I think the majority of people probably left to do with immigration. I think there was a lot of publicity around what could happen to the UK economy positively in terms of jobs for UK citizens.
I think people voted on emotion rather than facts. They were unhappy, they thought voting to leave would solve all immigration issues when obviously it wouldn't.
I'm Rob and I live here in London. Generally I think some people thought like immigrants would just be sent back home. Like generally, looking at newspaper headlines like the next day, and that we'd be immigrant free almost, which is just ridiculous.
What are the pros and cons of leaving the European Union? What do you think?
Well, the pros, there's none, because you can't change the geography of the UK. UK is next to Europe, and
What local businesses?
for local businesses, okay. For local businesses, like everybody, you depend on the economy as a whole to do well. But the fact is that the businesses which actually generally create the taxes and the wealth and the trade are large international companies, more and more. So they work beyond borders, and they don't. If you erect barriers, then it's very hard for them to succeed.
What is the worst thing that's going to happen with the UK after Brexit?
We'll have no friends. We'll have less influence. We'll never really leave Europe because there's no alternative trading partners.
Free movement of people is ended. Therefore, you can technically take back full control of your borders. Technically, you also gain complete political sovereignty. So if we want to make a law in our country, it's our law, no one else made it. I think the cons are obviously kind of clear economic losses in terms of trade. I think there'll be a lot of price hikes, a lot of inflation, those kind of dynamics in the market.
The positives, the pros are to do with lawmaking. We have complete control, but I think the negatives are tenfold that in terms of economic loss.
I mean, I've voted to remain, so I don't feel like there's a lot of pros. And the cons are, like I said, it's going to change, and I think the UK. It's also, my personality is allowing people to be slightly more racist and be a bit more outwardly racist, and I think that's prejudiced in some ways as well. I think it's sort of given a little bit of a gap to people thinking that that's the reasons why people have voted to leave. There's a lot of cons. What they're saying the pros are, is to do with the economy, is to do with immigration, is to do with the trade. Nobody actually knows what's going to happen.
I can't think of anything good about leaving the European Union, and the bad things are without number.
I guess I haven't really thought too much about the pros, more about the cons, I suppose. When someone says they voted leave, you often assume they've got some sort of issue with immigration. I've got a few mates who are pretty left wing and hate neoliberalism, so therefore they were voting against the European Union. And when they say they voted leave, people think they just had some sort of issue with immigrants.
The pros of leaving the EU would be some independence, maybe some of the tariffs that the EU impose on goods and trade and things like that. Obviously the cons is that you're going to be isolated from the rest of Europe.
How Brexit is going to affect the UK's economy and trade?
A lot of companies that either were looking to move here, especially tech companies that are up and coming or looking to go public soon, they're going to shift their eyes elsewhere. So I think losing that opportunity cost almost, or potential revenue is going to be a large hit. And then I think the large companies that are here that are international, moving their headquarters elsewhere, where there's more tax breaks and easier to hire international employees. So I think that's going to be the big miss.
What's going to happen with pound?
I think the pound is going to take an enormous drop straight away, but I think pretty much like the announcement of the vote, the pound took a drop and then it rose pretty sharply afterwards. So I think there's likely to be a lot of knee-jerk reaction across all segments of the market, the financial markets, trade markets. There's going to be a lot of unrest, shall we say, and uncertainty.
Well, £500 million a week is about 25 million pints of beer. So think about that, lads. 25 million pints of beer a week, or Europe.
Well, we normally grow about 2.5% to 3% a year. I would say maybe we grow at 1%. Maybe there's another economic crisis, whatever. We're not well equipped to deal with that. And of course, this makes it even more difficult because we're not part of a single market. We're 2.5% of the world economy instead of 22.5%. So we'll never get a good deal with China or Brazil or America or whatever. So everything's more complicated and harder.
Well, I guess the argument, I kind of get it. I think after Brexit, everything will just tank for a bit. It will, the pound will no doubt drop, but I'm sure it will recover over time.
My name is Alan and I'm from Scotland. Leaving the EU is very restrictive from a personal perspective, but from a business perspective, from an economic perspective, trade is an absolute, nightmare to understand how Britain will be, affected economically. The situation in Ireland with the border between the north and the south.
What do you think what's going to happen with this border?
I don't know. I mean, my family are actually Irish, and I've got a lot of understanding and history on the political situation there with regards to the Good Friday Agreement, and I think anything that is disruptive and potentially impactful of that, I think is absolutely just chaotic for it to be this close to actually leaving the EU and not have a solution for that. It's ludicrous.
What do you think about Nigel Farage? Where is he now?
I possibly could not say what I think about Nigel Farage for fear of police coming after me and maybe the MI5 and James Bond and stuff like that. But if Nigel Farage is watching,
I don't really know. I think it's an excellent question. He kind of spearheaded the whole thing over a decade, probably on TV and on radio and other media formats. But yeah, I think he didn't want to be the one to kind of have to actually solve the issues, and I think that's probably why the government's struggling today, because they never thought it was going to happen.
Don't know where he is. He's a waste of space, and he's, as Alex said, spearheaded us into this complete turmoil and now disappeared. So
I don't know where he is. I think he's absolutely awful. I don't really get why people like him so much. He just makes a lot of noise. He makes ridiculous comments. I think he's like retro politics, isn't he? Like, he just harks back to some glory days when everything was so brilliant, when it wasn't really.
Many people voted leave because they wanted to improve the UK's health system. What do you think what's going to happen with the health system after Brexit?
well, the NHS is going to be absolutely undermined. I have been lucky enough, I have been quite seriously ill in the last couple of years, and the NHS were... You had a noise when I go like that. The NHS were brilliant, and it is a worldwide kind of... It's a touch point for what it should be, what health service should be, and what services just for kind of the population should be. And it's clearly going to have an issue to it, because it's already been a thing with regards to licensing out and overcharging and sorry, I can't think of the word because of my brain damage, which the NHS helped with, and I can't think of that thing. But yes, the NHS is a touch point around the world, and if that has anything to do with making it worse.
Again, there's two sides to the whole argument, which is why I think it was such a close vote in the first place. Because on one side you could say, well, if there are less people migrating to the UK, then that will lessen the burden. But equally, a lot of the skills that we inherit as a result of migration will be lost.
I mean, they're going to just privatise the NHS. It's as simple as that, because there's no money.
The main thing is economic growth provides tax. And already since we've decided to leave the EU, we've lost a huge amount of growth and a huge amount of tax. We actually contribute to the EU something like 10 billion a year net, which is like 0.5% of our economy. It's virtually nothing for the huge benefits to be part of a single market. And if we have slow economic growth, we won't generate the tax, and there'll be less money to go around. And we need that money for social care, we need it for defence, we need it for investment, need it for all sorts of things. So slower economic growth means there's no extra money for the NHS.
One of the big points, maybe the one you're referencing, is the 350 million that would go to the NHS. Is that what you were mentioning? And that was basically one of the big strap lines, which wasn't really like true. I think that was based on quite a bit of a lie.
How do you see the impact of Brexit on jobs across the UK?
Oh, awful. How would you see the impact of a foot kicking a football miles away? The jobs would have to be the ball. Would the jobs have to be the ball and Brexit would be the foot, or would Britain be the... There's something to do with a football and a ball that's getting kicked really far away, and it's bad.
I think it'll be interesting in terms of policy what actually happens, and I think from personal experience as an American trying to find a job in the UK, it's quite difficult, and it's proving to be a very large wall to climb over, and I think it'll deter a lot of international talent from coming to the UK, which is a negative thing in my view, because there's a lot of talent overseas that could contribute to the economy, could contribute to companies that are even housed here.
Well, it depends. I work in finance, particularly property finance, and a lot of people are worried that a lot of highly skilled labour will cease to migrate into the UK. So that could be one economic impact. There's a political pressure on producing new houses and new homes, and if we haven't got the skill set to build them.
Any thoughts about Theresa May?
Not because she's a woman, because she's a woman in charge of the country.
I think she deserves what she got. She's power hungry. She said she was a Remainer, but she played a very tricky game during the whole campaign. She never came out and really supported David Cameron. So she never hit the right notes. It's always hard to sell things when you've got something, because people discount that and they always see the grass is greener. So she wanted to have the power, and she deserves what she gets. I have no sympathy for her at all. She is instinctively a Remainer of type, but she knows deep down that the whole thing is rubbish. There is no alternative solution, and she did it for the power, and she called the election, which is her fault, and she said Brexit means Brexit. She came out with the Lancaster speech, which is absolute rubbish. Eventually with Chequers she had to give her actual end game, and of course that is for the EU it's impossible, because you cannot be outside the EU and also get the benefits.
I feel quite sorry for her. I feel like she's been given a shit job. I feel like she's been given she voted to remain. She only, whatever people can say about her, she's the only person who's trying to get the job done. All the rest of them just ran off and just left their jobs. Like David Cameron was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. So was Boris Johnson in a way. So, I feel quite sorry for her, to be honest. She's been given a really shit task, and something that actually she didn't really want to do in the first place. So, good luck to her.
Theresa, it's hard. It's a thankless job that I wouldn't wish on anybody, and kudos to her for actually taking it on and sticking with it, especially as I do believe she was part of the Remain campaign, so she has accepted the obligation to continue with Brexit as it is, and tried to be as unbiased as possible. I think if she had it her way, there'd be a second referendum where everyone would vote to Remain, and that would be the easy option, but unfortunately democratically that can't happen, and unfortunately while I voted to remain in the UK, you've got to respect the opinion of the masses, and everybody has chosen to leave.
Is she going to come back from Brussels with deal?
No, because the EU cannot offer a deal, because they cannot allow somebody who leaves to get a good deal, get all the benefits and none of the costs. So I fully support the EU, and the UK has decided, for whatever reasons, to vote to come out, and we have to understand the consequences. If we don't like the consequences, we have to find a way to get back in. Otherwise we'll suffer, and I hope the EU sticks to their guns, because they have to protect what they've got, which is peace in Europe and a single market.
There has to be, I think what needs to be agreed is what I would refer to as a long stop date. There has got to be now, we're sort of 5 months away from actually leaving, so I think that there needs to be some kind of, not just for the public but for everyone's certainty, be it end of January, beginning of February, whenever, a certain amount of time before we actually leave, that we have to draw a line and say, are we realistically going to get a deal after this point in time, sort of a point of no return, if you like. So at least it gives everybody a bit of certainty that maybe come January, for example, if they said that the 31st of December was the last possible date for doing a deal, 1st of January we either know whether there's a deal what it looks like. If there's no deal, it just gives everybody a bit more time to prepare for it. So I think what would be catastrophic is to leave it until 28th of March or 29th, whenever it is, for anybody to know exactly whether we've got a deal or not.
What are the benefits of being in the European Union? What do you think?
I guess the only one I can really think of, then when you hear about, is access to the free market, I suppose.
The obvious one is the trade partnership with everybody, the single market. That's sort of what's been pushed in our faces in terms of media coverage, freedom of movement, holidaying. There's lots of sort of trade implications of sort of trade positive. Sort of trade relationships, I guess.
If you could vote again, would you vote the same?
If I could vote 100 times, I would, and I would just be more active. I was not active enough. I was quite active, but 30% of people didn't bother to vote. A lot of them young people, and I hope next time if it does happen, that all those people will vote and realise the consequences.
Yes, I would vote stay. I'd vote remain.
Of course, yes. I would vote more than once. I would happily go to jail for voter fraud if I could vote 1% more times than I did.
Absolutely, 100%, and I'm still clinging on to some potentially naive hope that the Brexit doesn't happen. I think that, depending on what happens with the Chequers deal and how it's voted through Parliament, and if the Tories who are against Brexit can stand up to Theresa May and forget about being in power and think about society, I'm very, very hopeful that it can somehow not actually happen. That could be completely naive, but I would 100% would vote to stay. If you gave me 100 chances, I would vote 100 times to stay.
What do you think about Donald Trump?
I have a lot of opinions on Donald Trump, and I'm not sure what will fit in this segment. But I think he is undoing a lot of progress, and that's the biggest negative impact.